the University of Florida just fired its entire DEI staff.
I don't think it ever occurred to me that transgender soldiers actually live in the barracks with females, because that's like some straight up pervert shit.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hello and happy Monday, everyone. So Tara and I were really hoping to give you an update on the bill, like whether or not our government is shutting down. But as usual, there's a delay and they have just pushed it now another week. No surprise there. It's the same freaking story every time, right?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, like I don't get it. How are you able to keep passing little continuations? Like the whole point is you have a date and you have to come up with a budget by that date. And if you don't, the
Right.
fucking government shuts down. And like, oh, we're going to give it another week. Well, you had fucking 3 months, whatever it was. You had
Mhm.
6 months before then. Like, we have delayed a budget for how long now? Almost
Right.
a year?
Yeah, I know. I was listening to one congressman the other day in an interview, and he said that his Democrat counterpart came up to him and he's like, I love it when you guys have the majority because nothing gets done, but you're the ones that get blamed for it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, couldn't have said it better. Like, that is exactly what happens. And that's why it's like, not just Democrats, there's Republicans too. And it's just ridiculous. And especially like working in corporate America for so long, if we ever missed a deadline, like you didn't, like you just
Yeah.
didn't because you would
Yeah.
lose your damn job. And yet these people just make a career of it. It's literally crazy.
I know. I know.
Oh, but I do have some exciting news to share. Well, I think it's exciting. So, when DeSantis was like in the presidential campaign, it really bothered me because I feel like he lost his momentum and we weren't seeing as much progress on things in Florida. But now he's back. And so far, he's not disappointing, at least me. So there was a Florida statute that was just approved on January 24th. And you're going to love this, Tara, because it prohibits universities from spending state or federal funds on DEI initiatives. And in case any of you guys are new to the podcast, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so as a result, the University of Florida just fired its entire DEI staff, which, by the way, included 13 workers. Like, I'm sorry, what? You need 13 full-time employees for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, give me a break. Those people were doing nothing but sitting by the water machine all day. And so their salaries in this department totaled to $5 million in funding, which can now be used more responsibly in recruiting faculty, not according to DEI. And the school also canceled any vendor DEI contracts that were in place as well. And I really think that this is the beginning of the end of DEI. I mean, we've talked about this before, but even Larry Fink, head of BlackRock, who started the whole damn thing, denounced it after it caused such a shit show. So I'm hoping that more states will follow suit and get back to hiring based on merit and not skin color.
Yeah, well, there's several states that have taken action against DEI already. I don't know if you remember this, Stephanie, but last summer, Texas passed Senate Bill 17, and it was very similar, prohibited state funding for public colleges and universities, so they couldn't have any DEI offices, and it also prohibited any kind of DIA. Good, it's here, I'm starting off the episode
DIA,
already.
DEI, it's all the same thing.
It's prohibiting DEI training of any kind or any kind of preparation. Oh my God, I cannot speak. I've had
Preferential. I got you.
preferential. Is it because I'm on my third coffee? I'm not sure.
I haven't even had one
Preferential.
cup of coffee, so I'm definitely going to be screwing things up, just to
I've
FYI.
got like my head is ahead of my mouth, apparently. So, okay, let's try this again. Texas is also prohibiting any kind of preferential treatment for hiring or financial aid or anything like that based on race, sex, color, or ethnicity. And this bill went into effect January 1st of this year. And like Texas is not fucking around because any campus that's found in violation by state auditors has 180 days to fix their shit or they risk losing their funding.
I wish that like Florida and Texas could just break away and be our
I
own
know.
little country. Like it would be so amazing. I just filed taxes and it was like, oh, you don't owe anything to your state because there's no state taxes here. Like it's amazing. But real quick, speaking of Texas, is your property and your animals and everything, are they still good after the fires?
Yeah, the fires are still raging, but they've kind of moved towards Oklahoma, from what I understand.
Hmm.
And I think it's still only like, I think last I saw was 30% contained, or maybe that's an overreaching statement. I looked earlier this morning. I think it was 30, but I'm not sure. Um, but they're getting strong winds again. So
Oh no, that's
I
not
don't know.
good.
It's like a
Well, I didn't
day-to-day
mean to get
thing.
us off topic, but I had like just while we're talking about it, I have to say one thing real quick because I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So remember how Biden went to Texas, like because
Mhm.
Trump was there? Well,
Yes.
I was watching the interview and he's like, yeah, I was flying overhead and you see all these homes on fire except for one because they had the right roof. And immediately I was like, remember Maui, the blue roofs?
The
Those
blue
didn't
roofs.
start, and that's what happens when there's like a laser. It bypasses that color on the spectrum, and I was like, oh my God, like maybe all these conspiracy theories are correct. So had to throw that in there, but I'm glad that your property's okay, and hopefully God, hopefully they put those out soon or stop
Yeah, and
spreading.
I'm gonna tell this on the podcast because I put it on TikTok, but we didn't actually talk about it on the podcast. So I'm gonna veer for a quick second. But after last Friday's episode, you and I were talking, and I was like, "Oh, I bet the Biden admin started the fires like in retaliation for Abbott, standing up for the border." And I was totally joking, but not really. And then I was talking to a friend who I was asking him like he lives in my neighborhood. And I said, like, do we know what caused the fires? And he said, yeah, people think it was the Biden admin. Ha ha ha. I was like, okay, because that's what I'm thinking, right? Like whole conspiracy shit. And then I see this news article. Apparently, like this is a common theory because I saw a news article. I did not make notes on it because we weren't talking about this today, but it was one of those fact-checking articles that was like the Biden admin is not responsible for the fires in Texas. And I'm like,
Okay, well,
that
the rule
basically
that I
means they
go
are.
by is yeah, if there's a fact checker, I whatever the fact checker says, I'm going to believe the opposite because I mean, have we not learned our lesson since 2020?
Exactly.
But you had so many comments on that post, and everyone was saying the same thing. They were like, without a doubt, like it wasn't even a question. Everyone's like, yeah, it
Yeah.
was the Biden admin. And then the blue roof thing, like people, that's going all over social media because people
Mhm.
are like, did he literally just say the quiet part out loud, which he's known to do because he's an idiot. So yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you. I think it's there's something there. And you know how obsessed I am with Maui. And now I think I'm gonna become obsessed with this fire in Texas because it seems like a lot of similarities.
I mean, again, so we're recording on Sunday, right? This is for Monday release.
Hmm.
Last I saw, it was well over 1 million acres burned. And it is, and that's from one of the three fires. And there's three
Yeah.
total. What?
Oh, you want to know what else I found out? Which I
Huh.
don't know if you already knew this because you're near Amarillo, right? Or like
Yeah.
that's somewhat in your vicinity.
Mhm.
Um, People are also saying on TikTok that that is supposed to be one of those, what do they call it? Like the future cities, like the green city or whatever.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, so are they clearing like acreage for that? Or like you had mentioned on the TikTok, like, are they trying to kill farmland and
Right.
food production plants or whatever?
That's where most of our cattle are, where most of our food comes from, is in the plains area. That's where all these ranches and farms are. So, I mean, I kept seeing videos and pictures of all these dead cattle, and it was so
Oh,
weird because that area of Texas is totally bipolar weather. I mean, the whole state of Texas is, but it's like you have the fires and the next day it's snowing, but
yeah.
it's like the snow was not enough to stop the fires. So It's
Well, and then like it wasn't even a year ago when that cattle ranch, remember there was like a
the
fire that
flooding.
mysteriously
Oh, that's right,
started
the fire.
and
Yeah.
it like killed all those cows. And it's like, okay, if it happens once, like, okay, happens twice. Now we're getting into coincidence land. Happens multiple times, which how many times has this happened over the past year? Like dozens at least. Then there's definitely something going on.
Yeah, I just checked the Texas A&M Forest Service site while you were talking, and there's now almost 1100, I'm sorry, almost 1,100,000 acres burned. It's only 15% contained, not 30.
1 million acres. I can't even
Yeah,
fathom
I
like
know.
how big that is.
Yeah, and when I was talking to a friend of mine, when I first asked if it come to our area, and he was like, because of the winds in Texas are so extreme, he was
Mhm.
like, it was moving at a speed of 2 football fields per second. Like you
Holy
can't control
cow.
that. Yeah.
No. Wow.
So
That's crazy. Well,
yeah,
I didn't
but
mean to get us
anyway,
off track, but like
no.
I mean, pay attention, everybody. Pay
Yeah,
attention.
exactly.
All right.
But
So
going
what else
back
is
to
happening?
going back to DEI. So, in addition to Texas and Florida, you had last Thursday, Iowa House lawmakers voted 56 to 39 to pass House File 2558, which would require Iowa's public universities to eliminate all their DEI staff positions, except for ones that are like necessary to comply with state and federal law. And universities have to take reasonable steps to make sure students don't have to do stupid shit like using pronouns or participating in DEI initiatives. And this same bill would also require community colleges to adopt policies and procedures that would prohibit the colleges from discriminating against staff, faculty, and students who don't subscribe to DEI ideology. And it still has to pass in the Senate, but like you said, I'm glad to see states are finally taking steps to like combat this woke fucking agenda. And I looked at a recent NBC News article, and it was saying that Republicans in more than 30 states have either introduced or passed more than 100 bills to ban or limit DEI initiatives. And you can go, they have a map on the NBC site. You can click by state and you can see which states are doing what. And currently, I think it's Texas, Florida, and Tennessee that have already approved bans on DEI in higher education and public offices. There's a bill sitting on the governor's desk in Utah that's meant to do the same thing. Last month, Arizona State Senator Anthony Kern introduced a bill to prohibit state and local governments and colleges and universities from even spending any money on DEI. And he's claiming there's, quote, ample evidence that professors have been intimidating students by basically taking state money and using it for political activism and promoting DEI instead of education. And then you have several other states, including Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Ohio, Kentucky, and Kansas, that have all passed measures in either the House or the Senate, and they're just waiting for consensus from the other chamber. So, like, the ball is definitely rolling on getting rid of this DEI shit.
Yeah, I feel like we're winning. You know, it's like people are pushing back against the nonsense. And even though the media, they try to make it seem like everyone is, just one of these like loony virtue signaling leftists, I really think that the majority of Americans are sick and tired of the woke nonsense. And I think this shows it. And I think it shows that we're going to win this battle. And it's happening a little bit slower than we'd like, but it's happening.
Yeah, and like let's take a look at what's happening at some of the top schools that have been pushing this DEI agenda. So I saw a report over the weekend that yet another DEI university hire has been accused of plagiarism. So like first it was Harvard with President Claudine Gay's plagiarism that was brought to light after the whole anti-Semitism scandal at the school a couple months ago. That was followed by another incident with a Harvard employee in January. This time it was the school's chief diversity and inclusion officer, Sherry Ann Charleston, who was accused of committing like dozens of instances of plagiarism over the past 15 years. Then another DEI officer at Harvard Extension School named Shirley Green is being accused of having plagiarized more than 40 passages from someone else's dissertation. So that's three people at Harvard. Like, clearly their DEI staff is a shit show. And now, most recently, you have this guy named Alan McKen, who's the chief DEI officer at Columbia University's Irving Medical Center. And he's being accused of using significant material from online sources like Wikipedia to write his doctoral dissertation. So I was reading in the Free Beacon, there's all these allegations implicating that over a fifth of his 163-page dissertation was taken verbatim from Wikipedia. So it's not like he even tried to take the information and put it in his own words. He just took it straight from the internet. And then throughout the dissertation, there were like straight up copies of paragraphs from other well-known African scholars, and he plagiarized over 60 people without giving any of them credit for their ideas. And like, these are the people that we have promoting DEI, like people who quite literally don't deserve to be in their positions because they didn't actually earn them on their own merit or do the work to get there. But like, if you say that out loud, you're accused of being a racist. And it's like, no, it's not fucking racism. Like, not going to get on the equality versus equity train right now, but I'm 100% in support of equal opportunity. But there is a difference between equality and equity. And I think it's completely hypocritical and inexcusable that we have these DEI leaders in our school system that are sanctimoniously promoting fairness and inclusivity when they didn't even earn their fucking positions, especially at Ivy League schools that are supposed to be like the best of the best. And like, isn't it interesting that all of these plagiarists are supposed to be like the experts in DEI?
Right. Well, and when you said like you get accused of being racist, I came across this psychologist and he was talking and citing all of these other, famous psychologists. And they all say the same thing, that like this whole thing with virtue signaling and like calling other people racist. He said, whenever you have that type of a reaction to something, it's because you're trying to hide that very thing that's present within you. So he's like, the people that are shouting racist, they are racist. And like, so they're projecting, and it makes so much sense. And it just makes it like easier for me to hear that from other people, because I'm like, I know that I'm not, but when you're going to like start spewing those things, then it's just showing like what your hidden, you know, personality is, or your hidden beliefs are. So it's just crazy, but that's what you get when you put DEI in place. You get people that should not be there that aren't qualified. And I was curious what Claudine Gay was up to. And I was surprised to find out it's now up to 50 different instances of plagiarism, which means no one on the board of Harvard properly vetted her. I mean, this was the president of Harvard, and she plagiarized 50 different times. And like, although she resigned as president, she still works there. She's still getting a salary. And it's like, in what world can you get caught in such a big lie that many times and keep your job? And again,
Well,
like, that's the problem with DEI.
yeah, but I think the thing that some people don't understand too is like, all you have to do is cite your sources. You can use
Yeah.
information from other people. You don't have to come up with all your own ideas. You could quote from 100 different people. You just have to give them credit for using their work.
Well,
How
and
hard is
that's the
that?
thing. Like, just my basic, English class in college showed you all that and how to
Mhm.
properly cite it. Like, it's such a core foundation of the world of like academics, that the fact that like a president of a university, especially an Ivy League, did
Yes.
that and just completely, because that's like their main crime is like plagiarism. Like, there's
Mhm.
no worse crime in a university. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
when I was in college, if you got caught plagiarizing, you were kicked out. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You were kicked out. They made a huge deal about it. So like, it's insane that someone could become the president of a university and have 50 different instances. We're not talking about like one that slipped through the cracks.
And
And
still be employed. Like,
yeah,
even though she resigned, she's still employed.
well, and that's the problem that they find themselves in, because now if they try to get rid of her, you better believe that she's going to go and try to sue them for, being discriminatory or whatever. And so that's what happens when you play these stupid games with things like DEI. But speaking of idiotic academics, there's a professor of political science from the University of Maryland. His name's Tom Schaller, and a journalist, Paul Waldman, that went on MSNBC to talk about their new book titled White Rural Rage: The Threat to American Democracy. And I would like to point out that these are two white men, by the way, of course, right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to play a clip so you can hear just how ridiculous this is.
Interconnected threat that white rural voters pose to the country. First of all, and we show 30 polls and national studies to demonstrate this. So we provide the receipts in chapter 6. They're the most racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, anti-gay geodemographic group in the country. Second, they're the most conspiracist group. QAnon support and subscribers, election denialism, COVID denialism and scientific skepticism, Obama birtherism. Third, anti-democratic sentiments. They don't believe in an independent press, free speech. They're most likely to say the president should be able to act unilaterally without any checks from Congress or the courts or the bureaucracy. They're also the most strongly white nationalist and white Christian nationalists. And fourth, they are most likely to excuse or justify violence as an acceptable alternative to peaceful public discourse.
So you mentioned a lot of
Okay, wow. So I didn't realize that white rural voters were the ones that are against free speech. So I
Mhm.
guess like they were the ones that were censoring everyone on the right and working with the FBI and CIA and Biden admin to censor people. I didn't realize that. I also didn't realize that white rural voters are the ones that are prone to violence instead of peaceful assembly. So I guess they must have been the ones in those Black Lives Matter riots. Is that correct? Because I'm confused. And like the best part about this nonsense is they back it up by saying, we have 30 polls to back this up. Like, are you kidding me? Because polls are so accurate, right? Like, no one takes polls like seriously. You take it with a grain of salt. And they're literally trying to characterize half of America based on 30 polls. Like, the stupidity is real. And I'm actually embarrassed for them. And I'm embarrassed for MSNBC to think that it's okay to play something like that on national television.
I'm so sick of the white guilt agenda. Like
Yeah.
I'm so fucking over it.
Well, just like that psychologist I was talking about said, like those guys in private are probably the most racist people there are,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. Well, it's like, again, all we have to do is go back to fucking Biden, who you
Yep.
can look up clips from his entire career in Congress, the Senate, vice president. Shit that he said is racist as fuck. And this is the man up there promoting this bullshit agenda. Like, no.
Yep. I know.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Well, according to Market Watch, DEI hiring is not as popular as it used to be either. So apparently, like in January, there were 272 job postings that had the word DEI in the title, compared to like every 1 million postings in general. And this was on Indeed. So in 2023, the number of DEI jobs was 323. And in 2021, it was almost 500. So clearly they're dropping. And I think after the backlash with like people boycotting Target and Disney and Bud Light over the last year or so, like some companies are starting to rethink their DEI policies. And I was reading an article in Bloomberg, and it was talking about how Uber is getting rid of some of their DEI language. And apparently they have phrases in their corporate language, including anti-racist, unconscious bias, and mandatory allyship. And these are all used to like counter what they believe is systemic racial prejudice. But now they're getting rid of these terms. And quite honestly, mandatory allyship, that's fucking stupid. They're all stupid, but what the fuck is that? And I guess these revisions are among more than like a dozen diversity related edits in annual filings with large companies this year. So Bloomberg was reporting that they reviewed 82 filings, and out of those, 1 in 5 had either removed their diversity language or they substituted words that could be seen as like less controversial. So you had JP Morgan Chase and UPS dropped references to specific groups like LGBTQ workers and women. And then Coca-Cola dropped references to a program that was focused on promoting women into senior roles. Caterpillar and Amgen removed references to their membership in the 110 Coalition, which is a coalition that was formed in 2020 to recruit or promote 1 million Black workers into middle-class jobs that don't require a 4-year degree. Colgate Palmolive removed mentions of mandatory allyship training. So apparently this term is like widespread in the corporate community. CVS removed mention of their diversity metric for their cash incentive program that they had introduced in 2021. Citizens Financial Group no longer mentions their goal of having women and people of color make up 50% of their candidate base for mid and senior level roles. And of course, when these companies were asked to comment on why they changed their language in these corporate filings, the common response was, they're all still very committed to their DEI goals, but I guess they just don't want it in writing anymore because
Well, now
it's
that
easier
Larry
for
Fink
people.
at BlackRock is no longer requiring it, they're like, no. And I would love to know, like, I would love to be a fly on the wall because I bet that they've seen dips in their numbers after implementing this because instead of picking the best person, you're picking someone based on, race. And it'll be interesting too to see like what happens when these Harvard graduates and other like woke schools graduate and go out into the workforce. Are people gonna be hesitant to hire someone that comes from a school that's so focused on that? Like that's what I want to know because I think it's gonna backfire on them.
Yeah, I was reading another article. I didn't make notes on it, but they were talking about how, oh, this is going to be so detrimental to minority communities because now, like, taking like the Florida and Texas, for example, now they're not going to be able to go to state schools and they're going to have to pay more to go to private schools that have DEI resources. And I'm like, give me a fucking break. Like, just apply like everybody else and go
Yeah.
through the whole thing. Like, anyway.
Right.
Um, I know we just talked shit about polls, but I want to talk about the results of a recent DEI survey that was conducted with military members. And I saw this in an Epic Times article and it came out a couple weeks ago. But they had like 229 US military members from all different branches. They were all different ranks from like soldiers all the way up through the brass. And they voluntarily participated in this DEI survey about their military experience. 86% said they'd been required to participate in DEI training. No surprise there, since that's been like the push over the last few
Right.
years. 12% said they've been forced to use pronouns to identify themselves or others. Over 32% said they believe they experienced reverse discrimination and were denied opportunities in favor of someone less qualified who met DEI goals. And over 53% said they've witnessed someone else experience that same reverse discrimination. 91% of participants, 91, said they believe DEI training has taken away from training for combat readiness. Nearly 59% say they've served with someone who identifies as transgender. And over 93% said they feel forced to believe in something that they don't when it comes to accepting transgenderism in the military. And one participant stated, quote, "A burly man pretending to be a woman living and showering in the women's barracks is a harmful absurdity. The more mature female soldiers can brush it off and avoid him, but the young women are being programmed to believe that military life includes sharing intimate spaces with mentally disturbed men," end quote. And he's totally right. But Stephanie, like, I know the DoD has been pushing this agenda for a while now, but I don't think it ever occurred to me that transgender soldiers actually live in the barracks with females because that's like some straight up pervert shit.
I didn't realize that either. And I would bet that there's quite a few of them that aren't really transgender. They just want to be in the women's, section. And like this is happening in prisons as well. And there's actually a new docuseries about it called Cruel and Unusual Punishment: The Male Takeover of Women's Prisons. And this covers the harm that's being done to women in prisons by these men, biological men that are claiming to be transgender so that they can be placed in a woman's prison. And Jennifer Barella was an inmate in Central California's women facility, and she documented her experience. So she said, quote, the transgender inmates started coming, I want to say during COVID. They were just slowly being incorporated into the general population. We're getting the predators, people who have been incarcerated for rape, men who have been incarcerated for oral copulation, men who have been incarcerated for crimes against women. We were very nervous, angry, and we weren't given a voice. So it's just crazy this is happening. And then I find another article in the Telegraph that says that British prisons are seeing a record number of biological men switching their gender in prison as well. And it's actually increased 17% in 1 year. And I could see why, because then they get sent to a women's prison where now they're the bigger and stronger ones of their fellow inmates. And here in the United States, taxpayers are even paying for sex reassignment surgery for these people. And like, Tara, notice how it's always men that are transitioning to women. Like, when's the last time you heard of a biological woman transitioning and being asked to go to a men's prison, or a female athlete trying to get on the male team by claiming to be transgender? Like, it never happens. It's always men that are taking full advantage of the screwed up system we have, and it needs to stop. It's absurd.
Yeah, well, it's also like you don't see like stories about traumatized boys because girls claiming to be transgender males are going into the men's restroom. You see
Right.
these fucking men going into the girls' room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's total insanity. And the fact that like more people aren't standing up to it says a lot about our society and just how weak we've become.
Yeah, well, here's someone surprisingly, well, I guess maybe not surprisingly because it's religion, but I've been very like on the fence with Pope Francis because his support of a lot of like the shit I don't agree with. But on Friday, he spoke out about gender theory. He spoke out against it. And he, again, being Catholic, there's only two genders, male and female. So he's commissioning studies into the dangers of DEI gender ideology. In his reasoning, he said that he believes it's threatening to humanity to cancel out our inherent differences because that makes everything the same. And when everything's the same, that cancels out humanity. Which,
I agree. And I'm
yeah,
surprised too, because I thought that the Vatican now went woke because of some of the
right.
things they've said in the past. So
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of surprised by that. But he also made reference to this book called Lord of the World. And I've never heard of it, but I was reading this in the Daily Caller. And this book is like a dystopian novel written in 1907. And it's about a society without religion that gets taken over by technology. And so he was saying, like, the Pope was saying, everyone needs to read this book. And I'm like, well, I'm not particularly religious, but we are about to be taken over by AI. So this book written in 1907 is like pretty much along the lines of what we're seeing today.
yeah, it is crazy. And the one thing I want to end with is I was listening to Tucker Carlson was giving a speech, and I wish that I had saved it for today's episode, but he was talking about this whole DEI thing. And he's like, okay, so they want to keep promoting diversity. And he's like, and I'm not against diversity, but here's the thing. Are you going to be more likely to be successful in the military, for example, when you're, in a dangerous situation where there's people shooting at you? Is it better to have a tight-knit group of people that have a lot of things in common that they can bond over? Or is it better to have a group of people that have nothing in common and don't
Right.
share the same beliefs and values? And I was like, holy shit, that is a really good point. A really
Mhm.
good point, because it is like it's the things we have in common that bonds us. Now, that's not to say we should only stick with like our race or our religion or our gender, but it's like we completely throw out the window the things that make us, bonding to one another. And we try to get everyone to think the same exact thing and have the same exact beliefs. And that's just, it's like ruining us as a society, you know, like we're throwing religion out the window. We're throwing values out the window. That's how we become zombies that just get sucked into technology. And maybe that's the goal. But I didn't really think about it till he pointed that out. Like, who's going to be more successful? A team of like tightly lit people that have the same values and beliefs, or people that are totally different? It's
Yeah.
a no-brainer.
Yeah, he's 100% correct. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but you just made me think about it. And, I'm sitting here talking shit about DEI because I don't agree with DEI. And if you've listened to our podcast for a long time, then you know that I'm very much in support of women, right?
Yeah.
But I am not in support of this shit. And
Mhm.
I know as a female who spent virtually my entire career, for the most part, in male dominated fields, that I know I was given a lot of opportunities because I was a female. But at the same time, when I talk about equality of opportunity and I talk about equity, there are certain things that I didn't qualify for because I wasn't fucking good enough to do the job.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with that. And this goes back to the very beginning of my career. I wrote a blog article about it once. I think we talked about it. I don't remember. I'm going to talk about it briefly. When I was first wanting to become a firefighter back in my like mid 20s, I think. And I was not an athletic kid growing up. I did not work out. I was in no way prepared for the academy. When I went to the academy, I got accepted into the academy and I fucking failed because I didn't pass the physical test. And I was like the president of my class academically. And I had to give a speech at graduation and I had not passed the physical exam. And I think today they would just fucking pass people. And I am
Oh, yeah.
so glad that I did not get passed because I had to go back and spend the next 6 months working my ass off to get to a point where I could pass the physical exam and actually qualify for my certification. And I am so grateful to the academy for not caving in because I was a female and just letting me pass, which I saw multiple times in my career as a cop. Females in positions that did not qualify to be there. Females that couldn't pass the fucking test, but they needed to reach their DEI agenda and their diversity goals. So they put unqualified people in positions in fucking life safety jobs where they shouldn't be.
Mhm.
And so this is why I'm so passionate about this whole DEI agenda.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think, they're trying to demonize a merit-based system, and that is just, it goes against like common sense, and we
Yeah.
just have to get back to common sense. And I think we are, like, I think most people agree with what we're saying. They might be afraid to admit it out loud, but I think a lot of people are pushing back. I think the boycotts with companies like, Bud Light and Disney are really helping to show other corporations like, hey, this is what happens when you follow this nonsense. And I think we're winning. I do. I think it's a long, long, long battle, but I think we're winning. So I
As
feel good
long
about that.
as long as we win the November election.
In November. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
man. All right. Well, that's what's going on. We'll keep you guys updated with the whole government shutdown thing if and when we get info on that. But thanks for tuning in, and I hope you have a great week. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.